Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to Total War Warhammer, and this is a bit of a tournament that I'm running. The first round is going to be against Zearoth as the Dwarves and Sammvt as the Empire, so this is just a very casual, low-level tournament, very casual sort of thing for people on something awful, and we've got 8 to 9 participants. In this one, it's going to be a best of 5 where you have to pick a different faction in each match. I've had them draw up a list for me so that there's no real counter picking. And yeah, it's going to be fun, just a light, enjoyable sort of thing for everybody over here. We've got Organ Gun automatically firing for the Dwarves here. Top of the hill, not going to really do anything. We got 4 units of Dwarf Warriors, 2 units of Miners with blasting charges, 4 units of Quarrelers, 2 units of Iron Breakers, and then you've got the typical Dwarven General, supported by 2 Runesmiths, and Runesmiths are a very good unit for the Dwarves. Empire over here has got 3 units of Handgunners, 2 units of Empire Knights, 4 units of regular Swordsmen, the Empire Captain, 3 units of Great Swords, 2 Empire Great Cannons, a unit of Spearmen as filler, and then the General. So, actually this is Karl Franz, if I recall correctly. Yeah, that's Karl Franz over there with Galmaraz. So, this is a pretty interesting army for the Empire. It's got a slightly too heavy group of non-armor piercing units here. We've got 5 of those sorts of units, and then the 2 cavalry. Cavalry is acceptable because it's really expensive to get those demigryph knights. I wouldn't necessarily always recommend it against things like dwarves necessarily, because they could just kill them, focus them down using something like the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, a very common thing for a dwarven player to have a little bit of access to. But at the same time, the dwarves are a much weaker faction in general when compared to the Empire. This frontier could be cracked very easily by greatswords as well, so they have to consider that sort of element to it. I do believe that the organ guns managed to pick off a few of the Empire Knights' hit points there, getting a good hit into them. No kills yet, but that is as it is. Now, the Dwarves have this sort of solid defensive formation. It's going to be a little bit hard to crack through for the Empire, but both players have invested a little bit in artillery, and this is not the best map for artillery. You've got this large hill sort of in the center here that forces both players to kind of advance towards a more central position or concede the high ground. And what's going to happen here, you've got the Dwarves sort of marching forward, not wanting to concede too much of the high ground, but the Empire is coming up pretty fast, and they're going to be able to take the position a little bit more easily. This does mean, though, that these Empire Great Cannons are not going to be the most effective. Similar to the Organ Gun, it's not going to have a good angle of attack here. Now, this Organ Gun could be pivoted at this point in time to face these Empire Knights, but as you can see, it is instead still marching up the hill, hoping for some good targets to show up. Now, Empire Knights are a good target for the Organ Guns. They don't have the most hit points, so they do die in a couple of volleys. Quarrelers starting to do their damage. They're not going to get the most off of these swordsmen because they are shielded, but it's still going to be quite a bit of damage. Focus fire coming down on this right flank one. I honestly would have waited for the great swords, although I don't know if they were seen at that point in time. I would have definitely switched fire over to them. They don't have shields. They are more heavily armored, though, so that does mean that potentially they're not going to take that much damage. I do tend to find that they do tend to take quite a bit, though. Organ Guns still sort of pushing their way a little bit forward, but they're not really going to be able to get much further than this. Still haven't been able to fire at all, really. And at this point in time, the Dwarf Warriors are now fully engaged in melee combat here. Miners are moving up here. They're going to try and chase away these handgunners, and Miners can effectively chase away those sorts of units. Got the first breakthrough of the swordsman over there. Lots of focus fire coming down. Rune of Wrath and Ruin coming down on these great swords. One unit is going to come crashing down in the center line there. Another unit is going to go chasing after the unit of miners that are coming after these handgunners over here. As it sort of chases after them, it is going to take a lot of fire from those quarrelers. Similarly, those miners have taken a few shots from the handgunners. Over here, another unit of greatswords coming around. This one's trying to flank, however. It's going to be taking a lot of blasting charges from both these miners, who are a little bit engaged with these swordsmen, but still able to throw a couple of those blasting charges, if I recall correctly. Then there's these Iron Breakers here, which are able to throw a much better volley. Here you can see all those blasting charges coming down from both those units. And it's going to cause a decent amount of hit point damage, but more importantly, those greatswords are not getting any semblance of a good charge, running into the center of a unit of Iron Breakers, which is even further going to negate that charge, meaning that these guys are missing a good chunk of their hit points and their damage to this fight. Over here, big charge coming in from those Empire Knights. They are getting hit by the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, however, it's going to make them a little bit less effective. You're seeing the Dwarves popping the Rune of Negation, stopping a lot of that damage coming in from those knightly units over there. Ironbreakers throwing their stuff into the melee combat. Now, I mean, this is as good a time as any to throw it in some sense because you've also got that Rune of Negation stopping a lot of that damage, but at the same time, it's a lot of friendly fire that you're committing to. Swordsmen and the Great Swords, however, taking some blasting charge damage. These Ironbreakers have moved into a position to sort of zone out these handgunners. Honestly, I would have moved them sort of further back over here, just so that they're not getting shot so much. The Quarrelers are turning their attention to the handgunners now, though. It's going to be a tough fight for them. Over here, these miners have moved out of the combat. This spearman cluster, as well as these swordsmen, are not really going to be able to do too much to these dwarf warriors, backed up as they are by a runesmith, as well as a unit of quarrelers if necessary. But these miners getting back here is going to let them more decisively beat these great swords. Great swords do a good job of fighting Ironbreakers very economically, so these dwarves are going to get a bit of relief here. Those great swords getting that big blasting charge hit to the back there before getting charged as well. So here you can see the last little few blasting charges before those miners run dry, and then the miners are going to run in. Quarrelers are supporting as well with fire. Knights are coming around to assist on this side, but they've taken quite a lot of damage from repeated Rune of Negations, or Rune of Wrath and Ruin rather, and they're going to basically continue taking those as this battle continues. Since they haven't been used rapidly or decisively, they haven't really caused any significant breakthroughs just yet. The weakened right flank on the Dwarven right, though, is going to start crumbling at this point in time, as well as their center. Part of that is from that cavalry charge, but it's also because they've simply been outmatched in terms of troop quality and troop numbers. 2 units of swordsmen, one of which is faltering, as well as a greatsword unit. All of that combined is very much easily going to push through the front and center of the Dwarven lines here. Runesmith fighting to the last along with his little buddies here with this unit of crossbowmen. These other crossbows still in the fight. These units over here trying to hold off and stop these Empire Knights from getting around too much of the stuff in the back there, but at the same time they're pretty depleted. This is not going to necessarily be that easy a fight for them. The Empire Knights, though, are getting really, really low on hit points, low on numbers. They're taking some blasting charges as they retreat. Those aren't going to deal too much damage to them, but honestly, I would have saved them for this knot over here, potentially. Quarrelers are doing a good amount of damage to those knights still, firing away at that. Runesmith over here, as well as this dwarf unit, are going to be able to hold through these spearmen pretty okay. I mean, spearmen have a real hard time. Captain fighting the Dwarven General. The Dwarven General is going to be able to hold out against a captain and beat him quite okay. It's not the best fight. Here comes some blasting charges. Going to shatter those swordsmen, if I recall correctly. But the Dwarven right has sort of given up the ghost, as it were. You've got tons of gunners still pouring fire. The Ironbreakers on this flank are gone. You've still got Quarrelers here, though, and they're going to be absolutely key to getting rid of these handgunners. If you can keep those protected and keep firing, you're going to be just fine. Swordsman over here being hit by the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, as well as some buffs, I believe, or I'm not really sure what that effect was, but I believe that was Rune of Wrath and Ruin. They're retreating now, still getting tons of fire in here to the front. Dwarf warriors taking shots, but finally those crossbows are free to fire back at these handgunners, and they're dealing an absolute ton of damage to them. The Empire Captain over here retreating, but he'll be back into the fight just a little bit. I don't believe he's capable of doing anything else at this point in time, though, with his hit points as they are. Tons of fire coming in from all sorts of different directions, but you can see these Quarrelers just about out of ammunition. They've been firing most of the game at things like Knights. Not their best targets, but I mean, it's what you've got to use. Over here, you got the rallied Runesmith as well as a unit of Quarrelers. They're going to come and target the Empire General. You can see that he's not really taking any damage over here, but these handgunners starting to take fire from these Quarrelers, and they're getting dropped pretty quickly just because they're low armor, unlike their adversary, and they're not shielded, unlike the Dwarven crossbowmen, Quarrelers. Cannons, having had a bad position all game, have gotten attack order on something. They're coming in a little bit closer. It's a unit of great swords here. I believe there's actually 2 units of great swords here, trying to fight to the last here. This is the last best hope for the Empire player. Fighting another Rune Priest as well as a unit of miners. Got the Organ gun sort of mixed in there. A little bit too close for comfort, honestly. A unit of Quarrelers over here, empty on ammunition. They're going to have to be used in melee. You've got runes coming down, trying to sort of decisively sweep away these great swords, and you're going to see that they are going to get surrounded by these dwarf warriors. And mixed in with all these runes, the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, the Rune of Protection or whatever, I can't remember the names of them, the armor and the damage resistance ones are all going to come together and knock them out of the fight here. At this point in time, it's going to come down partly to how well the Empire uses their units to clear away and defeat the Quarrelers while simultaneously using these handgunners. Because if the handgunners are protected, they're going to do a great job. They did take a hit from the organ gun there, and also took some pretty bad hits from those Quarrelers, so they're going to actually rout really, really quickly there. Another volley from those handgunners, but they're going to start retreating pretty soon as well once they get charged with the Quarrelers. Quarrelers are pretty decent in hand-to-hand combat, especially compared to another unit of handgunners. Now, the Rune of Wrath and the Rune going down on them, it's not going to do too much damage. They're too large a unit size, but it was a bit of a waste because they were probably going to break anyway. But it is what you got to do sometimes. Organ Gun is going to be under threat from these cavalry, but the cavalry is not going to take the time to pounce. Over here we've got the Empire General, Karl Franz, fighting with some Quarrelers. He's going to get charged by the Dwarf General, but the Dwarf General actually isn't armor-piercing, whereas Karl Franz is, so he's going to be able to take a big chunk out of that Dwarven General. And in fact, we probably should have seen the Empire General finishing off that Dwarf General, and that would have really swung the battle in a different way. Instead, we've got some cavalry running in, managing to get some hits on that organ gun before being forced to retreat by this Rune Priest. I do believe he'll get another Rune of Wrath and Rune on them pretty soon, but not quite yet. In the meantime, Karl Franz is sort of running away from these Ironbreakers, doesn't want to mess with them, doesn't want to get shot at by the Quarrelers, but the Quarrelers have other fish that they should be frying, namely these handgunners as well as these last little bits of greatswords. As you can see, they're firing away at the greatswords, doing a little bit of damage to them, but not a whole lot. Because of that heavy armor, it is, however, enough to cause them to waver, and he starts pulling them back. He probably should have committed them to something. Now they start routing, and they're never really going to contribute anything else to this fight. Up here, you've got these Empire Knights units. This Runesmith manages to get a Rune of Wrath and Rune onto the General, but that's only going to cause about 100 damage. It's not a whole lot. Much more effective is the Rune of Wrath and Rune put down on these Empire Knights, and that's going to start dropping them. They were at very low health already. This drops them to about 100 left. I mean, it only causes like 700 damage in total, the Rune of Wrath and Rune, so it's not a whole ton, but it's still pretty effective against those sorts of units, especially if you can get multiple castings of it off onto the same unit. If he gets another one off against this other unit of knights, he's pretty much going to have this in the bag. But he's going to be on that 90-second cooldown. He probably shouldn't have used it on that general just because it doesn't do anything to him. But you can eventually kill a general using it. It's a very, very slow means of doing so. General and the remaining dwarf units are piling up near the hill. Empire Cannon has gotten like way too close just because it, I think, was looking for a good angle, and Quarrelers back here managed to run down a unit of handgunners. Quarrelers being a much, much better melee combatant, you can just have them on that run order to chase down after them, and they'll eventually catch them or reach the game corner or something like that. Now, the Empire does have another great cannon, and it's actually in a pretty good position to fire at these dwarven units from a long distance. Organ Gun's starting to fire at this close-range cannon, but this close-range cannon isn't too much of a problem position, getting charged immediately by some Dwarf Warriors and some Miners. It's going to pretty much be the end of them. I do believe that the Organ Gun is also going to get some shots off against these Empire Knights over here, which is going to be a pretty bad thing for them. As you can see, that knocks out a good number of those Empire Knights. And I think that that shot actually does swing the battle quite a bit. That is to come later. But the Dwarves are getting a chance to gain back the cooldown on the Runes of Negation, the Runes of Wrath and Rune, all of that other good stuff there. They've gotten into combat with those guys. Now, the Dwarven General is going to get picked off by the cannon here, but it's a little bit too late because the Dwarves have enough leadership that if their units are still going to be able to win the fight, they are going to be able to carry the day. So with the General coming in like this, you're going to see him getting pegged off by a cannonball pretty soon. See if we can find that exact moment where the cannonball impacts him. Does manage to get off some buffs, it looks like. I mean, a single cannonball only does about 200 damage, so the fact that he's on 94 health to begin with is why this cannonball is able to kill him, but there it goes. Yeah, so I mean, if you're thinking that you can easily just snipe off a general using a cannon, not really. It takes an awful lot of cannonballs to the face before you've actually killed a full health general. Often they've got about 2,800 hit points, so a cannonball shot takes off maybe about 200 of their hit points at most. So you're going to take a lot of cannonballs before you go down. Karl Franz has taken out a unit of Quarrelers. Other Quarrelers, though, ready to rock, roll, and rumble. This is the remainder of the Empire lines, and Runes of Wrath and Rune are going to be absolutely devastating against these units. Karl Franz is the only sort of hope they have left. You'd have to hope that he could manage to basically take out all these dwarves by himself. And if he was at a little bit higher health, he possibly could. He's only got about 600 left. There's no armor-piercing units left on the Dwarven side other than this tiny little bit of miners, but they're not going to be too much of a problem. What I would do if I were the Dwarves is press these guys, though. I want to get into these handgunners more than anything. Karl Franz coming around over to here. He's probably going to help charge these Quarrelers. These handgunners, though, going to have to retreat. Don't want to get caught by those. The Empire Cannon does lose one of its cannons to the Organ Gun. Organ Gun, though, decides to switch fire, focusing more on this melee. If it figures, they figure if they can win that, they're going to be in a good spot. Quarrelers get out of position, get caught in the back with the rear charge from the cavalry. This forces the Dwarf player to run everything forward. These Quarrelers are going to hold out for long enough, though. And these Empire Knights are in such bad state that even though they cause like half of the hit points to the Quarrelers and damage immediately, it's not necessarily going to be that easy. Unfortunately, Rune of Wrath and Rune popped on the General again. Still think that the better target would be the Knights at this point in time, but this one unit of Knights is gone. Basically, they're down to 3 men, and they're going to be out of the fight. The Quarrelers are out of the fight now. Rune Priests are starting to run down here. They could probably have targeted the handgunners as well, I think is a better option, because they're armor-piercing. They've got good attack against the Dwarves. But at this point in time, the Empire player sort of YOLO charges everything into there. Now, Karl Franz will be able to cause a lot of damage and take out this unit of this Runesmith here. Rune of Negation comes down on him, though. So he doesn't die, but does cause him to flee. Now, the Dwarves managed to pile into the Empire, and the Empire piles into the Dwarves, including the handgunners, unfortunately. The handgunners being outside of the fight could have meant something quite significant. Seeing more runes popping here. This unit of Knights still has not been Rune of Wrath and ruined, and it would have been killed completely if it had. They're the remaining threat on the field, in my opinion. But this is going to signal the end of the fight here. Another Rune of Wrath and Rune coming down on the General of the Empire, Karl Franz, and that is going to be the end of the match here. The Rune Priests probably could have soloed him one-on-one even without using the Rune of Wrath and Rune at this point in time, but it's hard to say for sure. Karl Franz does tank a lot of damage from those non-armor piercing units. At this point in time, Karl Franz's morale runs out and the Empire flees. So that's a victory for the Dwarves for Zearoth K. So that was a pretty interesting victory, and it's a pretty important one, because since you're only allowed to use each faction once, it is very important to win with those sort of... if you can win with those behind factions, you're going to be in a really good spot. Here we've got the second game here. We've only got 4 games, so there's a bit of a spoiler there. We're going to go through the whole series, the whole bracket, rather. We've got Sammvt on Vampire counts. Got a pretty decent army here, but a pretty strange one, in my opinion. And then we've got Zeroth K on the other side over here. With a slightly weak Empire list, in my opinion. We'll see how that goes for him. So, Empire versus Vampire counts is a hard match to call in a lot of circumstances because the Empire and the Vampire counts are both such strong armies. But I think that the Empire has overinvested in certain elements here. Definitely, I think he's overinvested in assassination stuff. The Luminarch of Hysh is just a very assassination-focused tool. The Light Wizard is a very assassinated-focused tool. So he spent a grand total of something like 3,000 points on just trying to kill Manfred von Karstein. And even then, it's not necessarily going to be super easy. And then he's got 4 units of crossbowmen, which is another like 2,000 points. So his infantry line has really been depleted for the purpose of this. And even then, he could have gotten through it if he had way more demigryph knights, but instead he's got 2 units of demigryph knights. So going through the rosters here, we've got the Empire with the Luminarch of Hysh, the General of the Empire, regular old General, the Light Wizard, 4 units of crossbowmen, 2 units of demigryph knights with halberds, 4 units of halberdiers, and the 1 unit of spearmen with shields. So it's a pretty respectable roster in some respects, but very, very weak if they get engaged in melee combat. They've got skeleton spearmen, skeleton warriors, skeleton spearmen. They've got 2 units of blood knights with a necromancer and a white king. They've got 4 units of graveguard, and then they've got the 2 units of black knights as well. So it's a very cavalry-focused undead build, and I kind of actually like this undead build. It's a fairly interesting one. It's original, and it's actually quite strong against, in particular, this type of Empire list. Now, this is an unfortunate thing about this map that's a little bit wonky, but ranged units tend to fail if you try and fire them over this thing. So, I like this effect, but it would have been nice if it was clear that... for some reason that missiles can't pass over it. Now, maybe missiles can pass over it. You did see the missile particularly clipping into this bit of terrain here, in fact. But I've noticed cannonballs won't fire over here, for example, and stuff like that, so I think there's something else going on there. Now, the Luminarch is firing at some stuff that I find a little bit questionable. It's firing at these Black Knights over here, for example, taking a couple of them out, and that's a good shot, but, it's only got 10. And even if you had 10 perfectly good shots like that, where you're killing 5 or 7, or sorry, how many did they get here? They got 2 and 4, so they got 6 Black Knights there. If you got 6 Black Knights, you could kill a unit and 15 of Black Knights, and you still would not have paid for this. If you were firing it at the Blood Knights over here, that would be much more effective, and in fact, you are going to see it start doing that later. For now, though, it does turn and fire at the infantry, a really big waste of the Luminarch of Hysh. And you can see there it goes to the Skeleton Spearman, wipes out 8 of them, and then it also wipes out 9 of the Graveguard, but that's a really poor shot considering the value of the Luminarch of Hysh. Should be aiming at the Necromancer, in my opinion. I would be turning it to fire specifically at him, because he does make these Blood Knights a way more dangerous sort of proposition to face. Now, as it currently is, these Blood Knights with the Necromancer and the White King, they do cost way more than these 2 units of demigryph Knights with halberds, and they're going to be able to crack through the demigryph Knights with halberds very, very easily. I know that people think that these guys are really, really strong and really, really overpowered, but they're not that strong and overpowered. And you know, I'm going to say that, yeah, they are really, really strong. Here it's looking pretty bad for the Empire player. I mean, he doesn't have enough units to cover his backside, and with all this cavalry and with all these shooting missile units, he's going to be having a rough day with that. Luminarch has fired off too many shots into infantry that could have been used to fire at generals or something like that if necessary, or at the Blood Knights. You can see that he does fire off a shot into the Blood Knights, and it's a pretty good shot, but it is into the regular Blood Knights rather than into the Necromancer, who gets away relatively scot-free. It is possible to kill the Necromancer in like one shot with the Luminarch of Hysh, or come very, very close to it. This is one of those times where I would have actually put the Net of Ammontok on these guys, but instead he charges in with the demigryph Knights. And this is a really unfortunate part of this. This is, I think, where things go really sideways for him. That shot basically wipes out 4 of the demigryph Knights with halberds, basically does not touch the Blood Knights. Blood Knights are getting hit by the Invocation. I don't agree with this being the boosted Invocation. Only 1 unit of Blood Knights is actually taking damage. Demigryphs, however, are getting completely wrecked in that engagement. Lots of fire coming down onto the Skeleton Warriors. They're taking tons of damage, but that's not really too important. They're not a very important unit. Graveguard are virtually immune to missile weapons with high armor and a 50% block chance, so they're going to be just fine. Now the backline is completely exposed to these Black Knights, and they're going to have no problem whatsoever getting into the archers, running them down. Spearmen are trying to tangle them up a little bit, but they're not really stopping for those spearmen to fight those spearmen over there. And at this point in time, this is going to be a wrap-up job for the Undead against the Empire. I mean, yeah, they're going to lose these skeletons, and it's a bit of a shame, but these crossbowmen are all in significant trouble now. These Graveguard are going to be more than a match for the Halberdiers, especially Halberdiers that are being attacked from behind. Luminarch not able to get a shot off over there because it's now engaged in melee combat. It's going to make it a little bit difficult for them. Now these Spearmen are in a pretty good position to sandwich in these Black Knights, but it's not really going to matter tremendously. You got a rear charge against the Halberdiers with these Graveguard, trying to sort of ward units away from the flanks, and this ends up devolving pretty quickly into a bit of a mess. Got the White King and the Necromancer over here. I honestly would have put them near these Black Knights. I think that they're the units that sort of need the assistance. Invocation of Nehek popped on them to keep them in the fight, though, so they will keep in quite some time longer. The White King sort of coming in to help influence that fight as well, as the Black Knights get pulled out of combat. The Luminarch of Hysh is getting largely ignored, but to be honest, it does not actually have that much damage on it or anything like that, and it's not got much ammunition left on it either, so it's not like it really is going to contribute to this fight much anymore. I mean, you can see it firing into the Blood Knight cavalry there. It's not going to make a huge difference. Karl Franz, or the Empire General, rather, just regular Empire General, trying to run into the graveyard, but this knot of Empire troops starts all routing the Bright Wizard, having done very little as far as I can tell. Perhaps he's using Curse of the Midnight Wind on some things without me noticing, but he hasn't managed to do a whole lot in this particular match, and they do basically get encircled and crushed. So this is pretty much a this is a pretty clean match for the Undead for Sammvt. So yeah, that was pretty decisive. And I think that normally, like, this list feels too anemic for me to face against something like the Undead. I definitely wouldn't bring 4 crossbowmen. I think that really is the main problem there. But yeah, very, very well played by Sammvt. On to match 3 here. We got the Orcs of Zearoth against the Dwarves of Sammvt. Do apologize in advance for all the terrible mispronunciation I'm doing of all of this. So we've got here Grimgor Ironhide, the Orc Shaman, 3 units of Orc Boys, 2 units of Black Orcs, 4 units of the Orc Boar Boy Biggins, a unit of Goblin Spider Rider Archers, a giant Doomdiver Catapult against 2 cannons, a gyrocopter with brimstone guns, 4 units of Crossbowmen, 3 units of Longbeards, 2 units of Dwarf Warriors with Great Weapons, 4 units of Dwarf Warriors, the Rune Priest, Rune Smith rather, and Ungrim Iron Fist. So, yeah, I think that this is going to be one of those matches that sort of typically also favors the Orcs. Again, it's a top tier list against one of the relatively sort of lower 3-1s. But at the same time, I think the Dwarves do have an okay chance against this particular composition. They have to make absolute certain that they take out the Giant relatively decisively using either cannon fire or more realistically with crossbow fire. Other than that, though, Gyrocopter's coming out to play here. It's going to have no problem really taking out these little Goblin Doomdiver catapults. Giant over here, I believe, is visible, so I would have honestly switched targets to those. And if the cavalry over here was visible, I would definitely switch the targeting over to those. Now, Doomdiver Catapult is pretty dangerous, but the cannons actually have a really hard time hitting the Doomdiver Catapults themselves, and the Brimstone guns over here can actually charge them and win. So I would have not wasted those cannonballs on that. The cavalry over here coming in a fairly large mass to get a good flank against these dwarves. Longbeards are going to be on this flank. They're going to be turning to try and get a better angle. I would be turning these cannons by now. And I would definitely be bringing all of the crossbowmen over to this side and sort of huddling them behind Longbeards and stuff like that. But, you know, it doesn't really happen here. So here we got some shots being exchanged between these Forest Goblin Spider Riders, Archers, as well as these Quarrelers just firing back and forth between them. I mean, that's a good choice to use that. These Dwarf Warriors coming to try and get the flank here, try and stop them from charging in. And these Orc Boar Boy Biggins are forced to sort of shy away. Over here, sort of the Orc Infantry and their Giant is coming in. Going to be very, very dangerous that Giant gets to go unmolested, but the thing is, if a Giant gets hit by any sort of missile fire from Archers or what have you, he gets completely shredded down by Archers. Bombs coming down on the Orc Boar Boy Biggins as well as a lot of cannonballs, but they're not in a good position to block them with these warriors here. I would move these Longbeards back along here near the ridgeline to try and sort of block them off, but these Quarrelers are completely exposed. These cannons have gotten some good hits in, 23 kills and 23 kills, so that's not bad, but this leaves like these Quarrelers way too vulnerable for no really good reason, and they get hit there. Dwarf Warriors are going to come in, but it's going to not be in time to save these cannon crew. And this cannon crew just gets walloped very, very quickly. Infantry coming in now. We got some cannon fire shots against the Giant. I don't really agree with that. These Archers, these Quarrelers are too close to combat here. Grimgor Ironhide is just in combat now. He's sort of cromping away at these Axe Infantry here, and he's going to do a very good job. He's using Wah, he's using Spire. Black Orcs are going to have no problem crushing through these Dwarf Warriors, and these Archers, Quarrelers are not firing. They're too close to melee combat. They're too close to friendly units to fire over their heads. And you can see the number of these Dwarf Warriors' great weapons going down really quickly. The Giant's not being fired at all, and he's managed to get him in combat with Ungrim Iron Fist. And even though like he's the Slayer King and should have significant bonuses versus large, you can see that he doesn't in fact have a bonus versus large, and he's getting completely demolished by this Giant here. Ungrim Iron Fist just is not really good enough to defeat something as potent as a Giant. I would love to see him have a very, very large bonus versus large. You'd round up the Dwarf roster and their Dwarven list and let them sort of fight against that kind of thing a little bit more effectively. Over here, some of the cavalry is sort of getting chased off, but not permanently. The Gyrocopter over here sort of going to come in and start picking away at this Giant, but really these crossbowmen need to get in here, start firing at this Giant, but it's a little bit too late even if they do start firing at them right now. They do have a bit of a defensive line here, lots of Dwarf Warrior units. Unfortunately, they're kind of not facing the right direction, and these Orc Boar Boy Biggins are able to get a good charge in there. Rune Priest over here, though, able to support a little bit, keep their morale up at the very least. And you can see that the Giant here, he's being knocked over a little bit finally. He's taking some shots from cannons. I still think the cannon is not the best choice of weapon, though, against him. just because that low damage per second by comparison to other elements out there does make it a little bit weak for that. Now we've got these Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, these Dwarf Warriors here. They're not going to be able to do anything at all against these Black Orcs. Gyrocopters dropping some bombs here, but they don't deal actually that much damage. So that's not going to do a whole ton. I mean, if they did more armor piercing by percentage, that would be probably a fantastic run there. But as it is, tough units like these Black Orcs don't take that much damage from Gyrocopters. More buffs coming in from Grimgor Ironhide here. Giants now in amongst the crossbowmen, and that's going to be absolutely devastating to the dwarves here. Yeah, they're still firing the cannon at him. Yeah, they've sort of kept the cavalry away for a little bit longer, but they've lost one of the cannons, and their crossbowmen were what deal the damage to this giant, not the cannons. I mean, even if all three cannons connect with a volley, that's 600 damage or thereabouts. That's not a whole lot of health off of the skin of the back of the giant here with its thousands of... Well, actually, no, I think it's more like 1,200 damage because they have a 20-second cooldown between shots or something like that, so... it's a lot more damage, but at the same time it comes in a lot slower. Forest Goblin Spider Riders managing to charge their way into the cannons now. It's going to silence them. Some spells coming down on the greenskins here. Here we go, plus 58 melee attack. It's going to be fairly decisive at this point in time. I mean, basically you got this one wog ball versus the dwarves here. Rune Priest getting charged by some Orc Boar Boys. They basically just hit him and then run past. Another unit just sort of hits him and then run past. And, I mean, he's not taking much damage, but it's stopping him from doing stuff. And at this point in time, the Dwarven player concedes. So, it's another victory for Zearoth with that Orc sort of list there. And it really could have gone the way of the Dwarves in this particular one. I think that if they were really focusing that fire against that giant, they would have had a much better chance, but instead it did manage to get 51 kills. Pretty large number of those coming from him. The rest of their units, I mean, wouldn't have had a great time trying to get rid of these Black Orcs, but if they could, it would have worked out pretty well for them, and they had a massive numbers bonus and advantage against this Orc player. Very hard to sort of keep that numbers advantage effectively, though, when you're being outmaneuvered so heavily by the sheer number of cavalry that the Orcish player had. Anyway, let's go ahead on to the last round. Now, it goes to 4, so you can sort of tell what's going on, but in any event, you've got Chaos versus Undead. This is one that I would say that favors the Undead. Zeroth K on the Undead with a fairly sort of more standard one. A little bit weird in that it's got 2 units of Graveguard, no Cryptors, 2 units of Vargeist, no Cryptors. Up against a pretty unstandard Chaos list. You've got Kolek Sun Eater instead of your typical sort of Chaos General. And you've got 4 units of Great Weapon Chaos Warriors, 2 units of Halberd Chaos Warriors, a unit of Marauders, 2 units of Chaos Spawn, and then the Hell Cannon. Like, the Hell Cannon is what makes this really kind of weird to me, but... because artillery in general is not that great against undead. I would never really recommend taking artillery against undead, but in particular, when you're playing as chaos against undead, it's very, very strange. So if we were to take a look at the undead army here, it's got 2 units of Karen Wraiths. He's got, I believe, 3 units of Skeleton Spearmen. Yes, he does. He's got 2 units of Graveguard with Great Weapon. He's got the Necromancer. He's got Manfred von Karstein, 2 units of Terrorgeists, 2 units of Blood Knights. Very, very good cavalry here. Not too necessary, though, against Chaos, since Chaos doesn't have that many good, large monsters. Although Kolek is one of them, actually, so... yeah, I can see that them being a very, very useful tool in this fight. And I guess sometimes they take things like Giants, although I'm not actually sure how Blood Knights do against Giants. You got the Hell Cannon over here firing away at these Vargeists, and they actually managed to take out one of them at some point in time along the way, but they're not a great target just because that splash damage doesn't really get to come into effect. They've changed the aiming on those theoretically, so they should be better at taking out things like Vargeists, but I haven't really seen that improvement yet. I haven't seen that really be the case. So yeah, it's going to chug away and keep chucking off shots, but at this point in time he realizes that's probably not the best target. He switches his firing away at these Karen Wraiths, I believe, or maybe these Graveguard with great weapons, and he's going to miss a lot, actually. Like, this thing, I thought they were supposed to improve the targeting on it. He's chasing away those flyers with his unit of Marauders. They're just sort of chugging away, chucking spears at these guys. They're not doing a whole lot of damage, but they can eventually rack up some hits there and do a little bit there. The Chaos Spawn are stopping them from just sort of rushing in there. Now against Undead, I think the Forsaken are one of the best units in the game. It's one of the only real hopes that I think that Chaos actually has against Undead, as well as Giants. I think that Giants are extremely potent against Undead, but I mean, these elements can work out. It's just I don't think that they're particularly strong. The great weapon Chaos Warriors just only work well against Graveguard, and Graveguard are not really that popular right now. Even a guy that's taking them is only taking 2 of them. That's not actually that many. The Hex rates and Cairn rates are very, very popular right now. Cairn rates mostly, and Cryptors are still very, very popular. Here are these Marauders chased off by the Vargheists, unfortunately, so they're going to be quite gone from the match. Kolek Suneater chasing off these Blood Knights rather. Now he's going to take some damage from these guys because they do have a very good bonus versus large, and he's going to have to get out of there, but he is causing some good damage to these guys. What he needed to do was have this fight be supported. Here you can see him managing to get away, though. Kolek Suneater is pretty fast, even compared to Blood Knights. You can see that these guys have a speed of 75. He's got a speed of like 85, so he can get away from Blood Knights. Halberdiers coming in to try and assist, and they have that bonus versus large. It's actually quite a good bonus versus large, so they're going to be able to chase them away. Chaos Spawn had been charged earlier by the Blood Knights, and since they are large, they take a lot of damage from them. No armor as well, so the lack of armor piercing doesn't matter as much in that case. At this point in time, Chaos Warriors with great weapons are charging into combat. Another shot coming in from that, hitting a tree. Hell Cannon has not really paid for itself in this fight so far, and at this point in time, it's sort of tying up resources here. He's got these Chaos Warriors with halberds clustering sort of around it, and it's taking up those resources quite badly, in my opinion. Kolek Suneater, though, able to get into this unit of Graveguard with great weapons, and he's going to absolutely wreck them apart. Especially once he gets supported by these Chaos Spawn, who also do quite well against things like Graveguard with great weapons. Like, he's just going to mash through them quite well. And you can see that this unit's been, like, chunked for a third of its health already. Over here is where the concentration of the Vampire's forces are, easily overrunning and routing these units of Chaos Warriors with great weapons. And, like, just this much overwhelming force coming in and doing that kind of damage. Gehenna's Golden Hounds coming up from the Sorcerer of Metal from the Chaos side, as well as some Halberdiers rushing in to fill this gap. Chaos Spawn unbreakable, so they are doing a good job of keeping this tied down, but at the same time, it's not going to be that easy for them. Cairn Wraiths over here being hit by Invocation of Nihek. It's a very, very common thing now to see that happen with them. Now, a couple spells could go down on them to deal some pretty significant direct damage, but Lore of Battle is not the best for this. It does work, though. We've got Kolek coming in to try and take out this Necromancer, and if you can actually kill him, that would be great. However, these Blood Knights, seeing Kolek sort of picking on their Necromancer, are going to sweep in from this angle and come back for him. We've got shots coming in against these Vargheists, hitting some pretty good shots against those or the Hell Cannon firing those Vargheists, getting some good shots in there. Blood Knights coming in, and they're going to absolutely be able to wreck Kolek if he stays in that fight too long. Now, what he could have done is had these Chaos Warriors with great weapons run up here. They would have actually been quite good, effective against these guys, but, you know, it's a little bit questionable. Miscast from the Necromancer causes him to pop, but Kolek is going to have to get out of there, and unfortunately he's so weakened at this point in time that he's basically out of the fight, so that's going to be the end, essentially, of Kolek Suneater. Halberds from Chaos over here, fighting away at whatever they've got here to fight. Mostly they've got a Vampire to fight, and some trash units, if I recall correctly. There's some Skeletons still there. Skeleton Spearmen here crumbling away. Another one of those Gehenna's Golden Hounds. You can see it pouncing through the midst of these Blood Knights, but not really doing all that much damage. Again, it's not a particularly strong spell. Here we're going to probably see another Invocation of Nihek, and there we go. And that's going to start bringing the health back up of these Cairn Wraiths most particularly. The thing about this is that, this is Final Transmutation coming down from the that Gold Wizard, that Alchemist Wizard. So I do think Final Transmutation actually works quite well in this situation, but like it's not quite enough, especially for these units which are winning. These Cairn Wraiths are not losing combat really. All in all, Metal's just a really weak Lore of Magic, but it's kind of interesting. Searing Doom, he's using a lot of magic. Like, I'm not sure exactly how much he had in his pool, but I think he had quite a bit. And this is going to cause these Skeleton Spearmen to basically be out of the fight, but at the same time, these Chaos Warriors with Halberds, they've finally broken, and that's going to leave Chaos with really pretty much nothing else on his roster there. These Vargheists are going to come in to try and take out this Hell Cannon, if I recall correctly. Hell Cannon is unbreakable. Halberds over on the side are pretty much done for, even though this one's full health basically. The morale is going to be so profound that that is going to cause them to lose. And down goes Chaos in that one. So the first bracket goes to Zearoth K. Pretty interesting matches. Some of them were pretty close, some of them were less so, but all in all, I think it was a pretty good bracket. Anyway, that's our first set of matches for our tournament. I hope you found these enjoyable, and of course, as always, I hope to see you all next time.